Good afternoon and welcome to this Mastercard Price and Planet Coalition webinar in partnership with the Mail and Guardian. It's all about how to create a network effect, planting trees to fight climate change, which is in line with Arbor Week, which, as we know, runs from the 1st to the 7th of September annually here in South Africa. I'm your host, Michael Avery, and I saw this posted on one of my LinkedIn feeds, I think it was the other day. If the heat bothers you, plant a tree. If the water bothers you, plant a tree. If you like fruits, plant a tree. If you like birds, plant a tree. And if you like life, plant many trees. I think each day we grapple with the devastating impact of climate change, which has been precipitated by human economic activity over the last 100 years. We saw what happened over in New York recently, but Africa bears the biggest brunt of climate change and sadly has the least resources to mitigate its far-reaching impact. We've seen the recent publication of the sixth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, and that anticipates that the world will probably reach or exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit of warming within the next 2 decades. And really, on a geological timescale, in a human timescale, that really is just a blink of an eye. The report further states that only with ambitious emissions cuts might we be able to keep the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, with scientists saying that the limit is really necessary for preventing the worst climate impacts. Now, Mastercard has been committed to decarbonizing its operations for many years now, and it's also taking action to decarbonize its supply chains. Economic growth can no longer happen at the expense of the environment. The quality and the nature of our own future are really just deeply interwoven and linked to the health and well-being of our planet. It's almost trite to say that, but we really need to remind people, because to now we haven't seen the massive transformative changes necessary that are going to ensure that we can avoid the worst impacts. Well, encouragingly, sustainability research commissioned by Mastercard highlights that more consumers are looking for ways to help tackle climate change through their actions and behavior than ever before. Now, maybe it's sometimes in the language, as we'll get to, that we find ourselves tripped up. As part of the commemoration of Arbor Week this week, Mastercard welcomes you to this webinar. It's in partnership with the Mail and Guardian, and it's themed How to Create a Network Effect, Planting Trees for Climate Change. And I think as people change their attitudes and adjust their relationships with the environment, it's really important for all of us, all stakeholders, to take a stand and create innovative ways to inspire collective action to address climate change. And today, in order to do that, it's a great pleasure to be joined by Mark Elliott, the Division President at Mastercard Southern Africa. We've also got Dr. Adriana Marais, a South African theoretical physicist, technologist, and advocate for off-world exploration, a truly remarkable project that, as well as George Akwaro, who's a forester and Kenyan associate at the World Resources Institute, the WRI. And we're going to talk all about how planting trees is actually going to make a meaningful difference. Now, the difficult part of this conversation is to keep everyone on time. So I'm going to encourage our panelists just to keep their answers as short as they possibly can. And Dr. Adriana, firstly, over to you. Welcome. And the first question that I have to you is, what are some of the findings? Let's set a baseline for the conversation from the IPCC study. What does this tell us about the extreme human living conditions on Earth and the impact that they're going to have?
Thanks so much, Michael. It's a great responsibility, I think, to be tackling this particular conversation. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. So first of all, let's say this IPCC report is 4,000 pages long. I'd love to say I read each and every one of them, but luckily there are core findings that have been drawn out by experts from basically a collection of 14,000 peer-reviewed papers from hundreds and if not thousands of scientists from universities around the planet. This is really a drawing together and a summary of all of this peer-reviewed research that has taken place. So the core takeaways are that equivocally the events and with high confidence we can say that the plans put forward so Let's just maybe get simple steps and what this really means.
Dr. Marais, your line is just broken up, and I'm not sure if it's everyone. It's certainly not coming through very clearly on my side. So I'm just going to ask you if you can start from the top. Hopefully your line will clear up a little bit.
The natural environment, namely the biosphere, which is essentially our life support system, is battling to keep up with our growth and our human activity. This is showing in the pollution of resources like air, water, and soil. This is showing in the amount of emissions that we're making, which are keeping in. And here's an interesting one, which really speaks to, I think, global warming. Since 2005, our planet's trapping double the amount of heat than it does now. In 15 years, double the amount of heat. So let me leave it at that. And I think reducing emissions is not enough. Let me conclude my statement by saying that.
Absolutely. I think those are some pretty massive challenges. And Mark, to bring you into the conversation, considering the scale of the challenges, I know Mastercard commissioned a study on sustainability issues, highlighting people's passion for the environment. Can you just unpack some of the findings from the study? What are consumers' views on the environment and carbon footprint and the way that they're impacting the environment?
Sure. So thanks for having me this afternoon. So the research we did on sustainability revealed a marked increase in consumer passion for the environment as personal attitudes towards the environment evolve because of COVID, right? And so I think that's a real change, which this spirit of being more aware of what's going on around us. And following the research, which we did with a sample size of 1,000 adults in South Africa, 98% of respondents said that they're willing to take personal action on sustainability issues. 81% said they're more mindful of their own personal impact on the environment. And interestingly, this is, well, maybe unsurprisingly, is being led by Gen Z. 3/4 of adults surveyed felt reducing their carbon footprint is more important than pre-pandemic. And then in 2021, 48% of adults actually said that in South Africa that they would consider recycling as a way to dispose of their waste, while 42% wanted to learn more about environmental subjects. 54% admit that the increase in single-use plastic during the pandemic has encouraged them to make better environmental and sustainable decisions. And over half of them will also buy less impulsively and be more aware of what they buy, with this trend being led more by women, 59%, than men at 49%. So I think social media appears to be really driving an increase of this more environmentally conscious consumer, with 52% of respondents seeing information about climate change across social media channels, which is, I guess, unsurprising given how many mobile phones we all have. So some interesting insights there.
Very interesting insights. And just to echo what one of our delegates comments here, those are hope-giving statistics. If we have an engaged citizenry, and maybe we'll come back to what we call people, and maybe we shouldn't be calling them consumers, to Dr. Marais's earlier point while we were backstage and waiting, we might be able to build on that. George, what are your views on climate change, particularly the importance of sustainability towards improving people's lives and ensuring that nature can thrive?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on this webinar. And quickly, to me, climate change is one of the global challenges that face mankind right now, relating to issues to do with food, water, health, and etc. But then climate change comes in as a consequence and as a cause. A consequence in the sense that when we've degraded our lands, we've reduced our forests, issues to do with wildfires have contributed to emission of greenhouse gases, and these greenhouse gases has contributed heavily to global warming. As a result, we have things we are calling other things related to weather patterns that are not common to us, rather what we call variability in weather patterns and extreme events, including heavy rains like what we just saw in the US just recently. We have floods, we have prolonged droughts, and all these culminate into what we call other parts of the world that less contribute to these greenhouse gases being adversely impacted, including the sub-Saharan Africa, where we have this results into food insecurity as a product of reduced agricultural productivity. We have issues of reduced water or access to quality and quantity water. And in many cases, that coupled with issues with the reduction in pasture, we've seen that resulting into increased poverty, and in some instances, we have even conflicts. And so looking at it from the window of sustainability, and of which sustainability definition varies across sectors. And though as it varies, it has one common denominator about bringing out the changing the way resources are utilized or hazards are managed to so that adverse impacts to subsequent generations are reduced. And so looking at climate change in the lens of sustainability, I would think that we need to look at how we are approaching climate action. And in approaching climate action, we're looking at mitigation efforts that you're putting in place. We're looking at adaptation. We're also looking at resilience. And this cuts across how we produce our goods and services, how we finance development, and how we are governing our resources. And from a financial perspective, I will expect that those in the financial systems will provide money or money for investment into these production systems will always require, or rather put it as a requirement for the borrowers to encompass issues of principles of environment and social and governance into the investments. And so that way we'll be able to cushion these impacts as we grow forward. And then again, just to finalize on that, once we have adopted or we have implemented these measures on mitigation and adaptation, we'll be able to see our ecological balance our ecological functions balancing, and in the long run, we'll have people and nature that are thriving in a balanced ecosystem. Back to you,
Michael. Thank you, George. Yes, and I think many of the issues that you touched on relate to the just energy transition that we're debating a lot here in South Africa. How do we do this in a way that is mindful of our responsibility to people as governments for socio-economic development, but also mindful of the urgent and pressing need to act on climate change? Mark, can you just give us an overview of the Mastercard Priceless Planet Coalition to this end?
Sure. So the Priceless Planet Coalition unites the efforts of consumers, financial institutions, merchants, and cities to fight climate change. Businesses are part of the global ecosystem, and Mastercard understands that the value of the total is greater than the sum of its parts. And enabling the whole system benefits everyone in the system. So this is what we call the network effect. And about a year ago, we decided to bring it together with consumers, companies, i.e. financial institutions and merchants, sustainability organizations, experts, and people all over the world to unite and fight climate change by pledging to plant 100 million trees by 2025. And planning is already underway for restoration of 1.2 million trees in Kenya's Makuli Nzai landscape. And as a technology company, we've always been focused on interconnectivity. And this is a powerful moment in time for building the sustainable society, economy, and planet, which is what we hope to achieve with the Priceless Planet Coalition. Priceless Planet Coalition is essentially a platform to unite corporate sustainability efforts and make meaningful investments to preserve the environment.
Now, there are lots of partners that you could choose to work with in this capacity. Why have you chosen to work with Conservation International and World Resource Institute as your restoration partners on this project?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So Mastercard selected the global environmental organizations, Conservation International and World Resource Institute, as our forest restoration partners to lead the mobilization and coordination of forestation efforts. They were selected based on their science-based and holistic approaches to restoration and successful track records in global conservation. With the help of these organizations, Mastercard is developing a global portfolio of high-quality restoration projects emphasizing those with the most potential for positive impact on climate, community, and biodiversity.
Now, George, just to bring you in there on the other side of that equation, I mean, why have you chosen to work with Mastercard at this time when we do see the themes of ESG, sustainable investing, impact investing, they're all over the place. And I do think that there are some corporates who might just be wanting to hop on the bandwagon, so to speak. What informed your approach to this partnership with Mastercard? Oh, I think you're on mute there, George.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael. And from our end as WRI, we know and view that WRI and Mastercard and Priceless Planet Coalition have different strengths that complement each other in solving global environmental problems. For example, WRI is a think tank that's known to work at the nexus of environment and development and provides or advises better development pathways friendly to environment using cutting-edge research and findings. And looking at Mastercard, it's like Marcus mentioned, is a technology and financial think tank that is well known, or rather that has innovated technology in terms of financial systems that develop this platform that brings together partners, merchants, consumers, banks, and other customers to mobilize resources towards climate action. And so we have two different technologies here that are coming into play. And what we want to do now, we want to bring them together into a transformative and innovative research, providing information, action against climate change, of which both of us, WRI brings out the innovative research aspect of it. And Mastercard and Priceless Planet Coalition brings in the platform that mobilizes these resources to provide financing for this action against climate change. And so at the end of the day, this instills environmental action in clients, inspiring change and pursuing sustainable innovation. But as a partnership, this partnership brings together, WRI ensures that this partnership provides Mastercard the right expertise, skill set, and resources to bring an initiative of this nature, this restoration process, to life. And so I would say that through this partnership between WRI, Mastercard, and Priceless Planet Coalition, practical strategies for sustainable change will be developed through use of effective scientific research and tools to implement them. And a case example is the work we're doing in Makueni that Mark mentioned in passing. Back to you, Michael.
And that is phenomenal work. I mean, the restoration of 1.2 million trees in that landscape is quite something. And Mark, maybe just to bring you back in on that point, and if I can ask everyone to just put their speakers on mute while you're not on. I can hear someone whistling a very interesting tune in the background there. Mark, if we look at reforestation efforts, I mean, clearly we know that trees are great captures of carbon emissions. But what are the other positive impacts on climate change that reforestation has in this great effort to mitigate and ameliorate some of the impacts?
Sure. Apart from the birds, which obviously enjoy trees so they can sing in your webinars. Yeah, so I think beyond forest restoration, Mastercard continues to develop environmentally conscious solutions that enable more people to embrace a sustainable lifestyle through their spending choices. This isn't only a differentiator for brands, merchants, banks, etc., but it's also what consumers want increasingly. And you know, through the Priceless Planet product ecosystem, we're empowering consumers to be part of the solution in different ways, which we believe is the best way of driving change. So a partnership with the Swedish fintech startup Economy enables people to track, understand, and take accountability of their environmental footprint through digital tools that set a new standard for purpose-driven payment solutions. For people interested in contributing to forestation projects and other environmental causes, Mastercard donation platform and soon to be available mobile app will enable direct donations to the forestation partners of the Priceless Planet Coalition and round up everyday purchases. Mastercard also offers a widget, a web API that can facilitate banks and merchants to enable cardholder donations in diverse points of the consumer journey. Mastercard's also embedding into the coalition into loyalty programs run on behalf of issuers and merchants. For example, the company will enable cardholders to redeem reward points for trees through their gift catalog and in real time through Mastercard Pay with Rewards. To enable issuers to offer cards made from more sustainable materials, Mastercard launched the Greener Payments Partnership, GPP, producing the first-use polyvinyl chloride, PVC, in all cards and to research alternative materials for cards, including recyclable, biosourced and biodegradable material. And to date, more than 60 FIs across the world have issued cards made from 28 different sustainable materials.
So that is a real-world example of the impact. Sorry, you were just breaking up right at the end there, Mark. I thought you had concluded. I was just saying that a real-world example of some of the impact you're making, not just in your supply chain, but with the scale that Mastercard has, helping people round up, channeling much-needed funds into the planting of more trees around the world. Dr. Adriano, I just want to bring you back into the conversation. And obviously through this pandemic, we're talking before the webinar started, about how difficult it's been just to execute on your project, for example. What effect has the pandemic had on the environment, though? And what lessons can we learn from the pandemic through this lens of sustainability?
Thanks, Michael. Bringing me back, you're going to bring that little bird tweeting in the tree, but I hope it's on theme for today's chat.
The dog point.
Global carbon dioxide emissions fell by 6.4% during 2020. That's 2.3 billion tons. So not an amount not a small amount, let's say. That's double Japan's yearly emissions. But let me take a bit of a different slant on perhaps the pandemic and perhaps the notion of consumers in this whole scenario. So, epidemics are predicted to be more probable in the kind of scenario that we're creating, namely where we are disrupting the biosphere, causing a mass global extinction event and disrupting our own supply of water, food, and all their contributions to essentially our life support system or our biosphere. So I'm going to talk a bit more about the off-world applications a bit later. I think I'll elaborate more on that, but let me give an example, a story of how I spent some of 2020, probably reducing some of my carbon emissions. So in preparation for our off-world project, we had traveled to Antarctica, to deserts in the Middle East, to Africa, to look at places to demonstrate off-world living, which will involve, amongst other things, eliminating the concept of waste, right? So analyzing the environment, carefully using resources from that environment, and using all outputs from a community of humans as inputs again back into the system. So once we realized that travel had been stalled and that a lockdown was imminent, my partner and I actually sped up a project we'd been working on, which was building a cabin in the Tsitsikamma forest in a completely inaccessible part of the forest. So there's no road, in other words. We had to carry around 2 to 3 tons of equipment by hand, by foot, along a trail through the forest down to the location where we built our cabin. And during most of 2020, we battled with constraints on our shelter, i.e. rain coming through the roof, constraints on our power production. Car batteries is what we carried down there for our power. Water, we collected from the river in aluminium buckets so that we could also heat it for showering, etc. Our food, we got from the grocery store. It was winter here in South Africa, and our communications were particularly painful, getting 1 or 2 bars if we climb up a tree, for example. So this was a fun experiment for us. We got a sense of humility, dealing with a composting toilet, washing clothes in the river. But I think for me, the most powerful take home was that this is how billions of humans on the planet struggle to participate in this current technological era on a daily basis. And really reflecting on our resource consumption as animals that are called humans, because that's all we are at the end of the day. Maybe slightly more complex society of animals than the ones from which we have emerged. And to reflect on, I think, this unity with nature, remembering that the biosphere is what sustains us and that we are just a small part of this very complex network. For me, this was an excellent opportunity to reflect on these things. And perhaps all of us, I think, have had more than enough time to reflect during the pandemic, and our resources should certainly be at the heart of this reflection. How much do we need to be functional? How much do we need to be happy? And can the planet support this kind of lifestyle that we are trying to build for ourselves and for all 8 billion? Because if the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that a decision here, an event there, a phenomenon here impacts all of us. Our global communications network is beautiful, but in terms of the prerequisites for functional healthcare systems, the prerequisites for functional education systems, we have to make decisions that will benefit all 8 billion people as we go forward to a more positive future.
And I love what you said earlier about changing the language from calling people consumers to calling people collaborators and partners on this journey. And I'm sure that is something that we need to really look at. Mark, as you engage with your customers and clients around the world, does their behavior matter when we really need large-scale systemic change? As I referenced in the very beginning, we need to see an order of magnitude more happening in terms of our response to climate change. So what steps can an ordinary individual take in the face of what seems to be an overwhelming challenge?
Yes, I think following on, I think from what we just heard, large-scale change is needed, and consumers play an important role, or collaborators, as we should refer to them. And but they need to be equipped with the right educational information and data. And Mastercard's research says that, you know, it's mattering more and more to consumers. Approximately 60% of the world's carbon emissions are generated by the production and use of household goods and services. And given we're a payments leader that sits at the intersection of this commerce for 3 billion cardholders, we can play a powerful role by offering choice, information, and ideas as to how they can contribute to a healthy global environment. By leveraging our global network and our position, we can inform consumers at scale around the carbon footprint of their spending, as well as educate them to reduce their impact and taking action to do more. What's more, with better information and data, consumers will also be able to prepare to advocate for changes they want from government and the business world. So this is how we can unlock the power of our network for change. You know, there is various things that people can do out there. They can use rechargeable batteries. They can buy in bulk and avoid plastic packaging. Something I'm trying at home is to start a compost bin to nourish your plants, and obviously avoid using plastic packaging at home, and try more eco-friendly plastic wraps like bees wrap or reusable containers to keep your food fresh in the fridge. So I think there's lots of things where we can all personally get involved. I'm trying a few of them myself at home, and trying to become a little bit more environmentally friendly as a family. So yeah, plenty for us to all do and to collaborate on.
And it all really boils down to collective steps and a collective effort that then builds up into something really powerful. And we're certainly seeing through your research that the desire is there, the awareness of the problems. I think more and more people are just looking for ways that they can actually make that change. What are those actions that they can do? So Dr. Adriana, to bring you back on that point, what are the ways and actions that humans should be taking to improve standards of living for people on Earth, taking guidance from life elsewhere in our solar system, life on other planets? What are the lessons that could be learned here on Earth from your off-world experiment and your off-world project? You're on mute.
It's difficult to make sweeping statements in this highly uncertain era that we're all immersed in, filled with anxiety about the future. But if there's one thing I can say, in my opinion, with certainty, is that things are not going to get less extreme. So for people who don't plan to explore beyond Earth, there are some lessons that we can collaborate on for those of us who are purposefully seeking more extreme environments than Earth. But this is the kind of trajectory that we need to be on as humanity, because getting out of our comfort zones speeds up learnings, which can then be applied back to the relative comfort of Earth, let's say. So, you know, we're already in space. Let me firstly point that out. For those of us who are not planning to travel to space, you already have. And some have quoted that there are no passengers on planet Earth, only crew. So we are this crew on this spaceship whirring around the sun with a limited resource set that is our life support system. And we've got to start paying more attention to the footprint, not only carbon, but in all senses of the word that we're having, causing, you know, more than half of known animal and plant species to be near extinction in the next couple of decades. Is a shocking, you know, legacy to think about leaving during our activities. So let me try to focus a bit on the question you've asked. I mean, we're on a planet that's 71% covered by water. When we look at planets in the rest of the solar system, there's not a single one that hosts liquid water on the surface. When we look at other planets in the solar system, there's not a single one that we've seen life existing on from space. So we truly need to be grateful, I think, is one word that we can encompass the feelings that we should have when looking around at this planet, that we can access liquid water, breathe the air, food grows by itself. So how does this relate back to new types of systems? And when we are planning now not to be down in the Tsitsikamma forest, but to be, which is a rather lush environment, let me say, but rather in extreme places like the Namib Desert, one of the driest and the oldest desert on the planet. What are we going to bring with, and how are we going to survive there with almost with no existing infrastructure, no liquid water on the surface? And how does this relate back to the kinds of systems that we can employ, whether we're thinking about informal settlements, overcrowded city centers, or indeed a base on the surface of Mars? And I think we're familiar with these technologies, so I'm not going to go into detail, but I think you know, demonstrating what's possible with these technologies is something that we need to do more of. We're just going to have 10 people arriving at this location, but we'd like to show that we can eliminate the concept of waste from this community. We'll have solar panels, we'll have wind turbines, we'll have atmospheric water extractors, we'll have wastewater management systems, we'll have indoor agriculture, and we'll have communication systems that keeps tabs on all of these resources so that not a single molecule of water escapes by evaporation into the atmosphere without us knowing about it and trying to limit this. So this is a very broad outline of what we plan to do, but there's no quantum computing involved here. There could be, but it's not necessary. Artificial intelligence, maybe, but not required. These kind of technologies are off the shelf, and we need government level, we need private level, we need community level, municipal level, all the way down to individual level to understand what's out there, technologically speaking, and increasingly bring those efficient technologies into our daily living in a much faster way than we're currently doing.
Resource efficiency, that's certainly what screams out to me for what we hearing you do and highlighting through your efforts, is being a lot more mindful of how we use those very precious and scarce resources that we do just abuse and consume and throw away. George, and before I go into the next question, I just want to bring up the poll here. We've just launched a poll. How many trees does Mastercard's hashtag Priceless Planet Coalition Initiative pledge to restore by 2025? So get on and vote into that poll. Currently, we have 100 million at 66% out in the lead. George, why is restoring trees so important to reducing carbon emissions? Why is this such a worthwhile project? Please unmute yourself.
I was trying to read the questions on the other side. So, Michael, as we speak now, we all know that rather statistics tell us that trees contribute to 15 to 20% of global greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, which is rather quickly results into it contributes heavily to global warming and eventually to climate change. And in the same vein, we've seen rather research findings tells us that the same trees or through forest systems were able to mop up 2.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually. And then this, as a result, has been hailed as one of the most cost-effective nature-based solutions to tackle climate change. And then further again, just to justify why these trees are important, or we need to look into trees for restoration. Trees also have, or rather come with multiple benefits. For example, we have situations, we know trees support hydrology in terms of water, support food production, improving agricultural productivity. We have pollinators like bees and butterflies from trees. We have fruits coming from trees. And then also they just create that enabling environment for biodiversity, increasing biodiversity, and by extension, looking at this increased biodiversity increases the ability of, rather, the provision of life support systems that we have. And then by extension, we have these trees also supporting the idea of regulating climate change at micro level. So it's important for us to invest in trees as one of the best and cost-effective ways to mitigate climate change. Back to you, Michael.
Thanks, George. And I see William Bond is posting some very thought-provoking questions. William, we will get to them at the end of the panel and surely address some of those interesting points that you do raise. Now, Mark, talk to me from a Mastercard perspective about this project and why this is so important to Mastercard right now.
Well, I think climate change impacts you regardless of who you are, but the effects on those who are socially or economically disadvantaged actually could be catastrophic. So we created the Priceless Planet Coalition to not only inspire change in terms of climate change, but also to be a force for good for people, to ensure people, communities, businesses, and the planet can thrive. So the coalition has a restoration model that's not only focused on planting trees, but also regrowing forests in geographies with the greatest impact and most potential for a positive climate, community, and biodiversity impact. So, we've got some examples, and one of those, as we mentioned earlier, is in Kenya, where we're planning to restore 1.2 million trees that would be a mix of native species. The reforestation will also enable the soil to retain more water, while tree roots will bind the soil, improving the water quality downstream. So trees are a cost-efficient, nature-based solution for mitigating the impact of greenhouse gas emissions. And according to the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, limiting the rise in average temperature to 1.5 centigrade by 2050 requires an extra 1 billion hectare of trees. The sustainable forestation projects help reduce the occurrence of climate-related disasters such as fires and flooding, and trees really help clean the air we breathe, filter the water we drink, and provide a habitat for wildlife.
And it's about doing something. What I like about planting trees, it's accessible to ordinary citizens. If you say, well, what can I do in the face of these overwhelming challenges? Well, plant a tree. And you actually are making a very positive contribution overall in the face of these significant challenges. Just tell us about the actual activities, the practical on-the-ground, grassroots, no pun intended, actually, yes, pun intended, activities that you're doing. Where will some of these coalition projects be taking place? You mentioned in Kenya?
Yeah, in the Makueni County. So there's 1.2 million trees with a mix of native species, and they'll include fruit and fodder trees. And then reforesting these important catchment areas will actually help store the water within the soils, regulating its release into the rivers and streams. And the tree roots, back to your point, will also bind the soil along the river buffers, helping improve the water quality. So food production will then be improved as well, and the catchment restoration will create reliable sources of water. And the planting is a mix of high-value fruit trees will create crops that can be consumed locally and sold to markets. In Brazil, the Amazon and Atlantic forests, we're going to be protecting and restoring the Amazon and the Atlantic forests in Brazil, which will not only have an enormous impact on climate, but also safeguard the greatest biodiversity and freshwater reserves on the earth. So this vital project will aid in the preservation and restoration of local and regional water cycles, which will help avoid some of the collapse of the rainforests and ensure the health of the overall ecosystem. And then finally, in Australia, in the Southern Tablelands, Riverina and Western Sydney. Throughout you remember the bushfires, which were very prevalent in 2019 and 2020, more than 18.6 million hectares of land was burned, killing 37 people and millions of animals, while destroying over 5,900 buildings and 2,800 homes. So our ambition is to revitalize communities affected by the bushfires, restoring the damaged landscapes and developing a long-term blueprint for addressing wildfire and disaster resilience.
That's certainly a comprehensive response. George, if you look at the reforestation efforts, how might they address other climate change issues? What is the AFR100 Initiative, which is, I believe, mobilizing action towards restoring Africa's degraded landscapes?
Yeah, Michael, just like to mention, AFR100 is mobilizing African countries towards restoration. But to start with, WRI has been a founding member of the African Forest Restoration Initiative, which was signed into in 2015 during the COP23, I think, in Paris. And together with BMZ, WRI initiated this process. So it's WRI, AUDA, and BMZ. BMZ is the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany. They were able to establish a secretariat that this secretariat was hosted in South Africa. And under that, the first phase of this project, this program between 2015 and 2020 was to help mobilize political will to restoration. And this included helping countries to carry out what we call restoration opportunities in their countries, and resulted into some targets. For example, Kenya committed to restoring 5.1 million hectares, but then continentally, 31 countries signed into the African Forest Restoration Initiative 100, and that brought total of 130 million hectares commitment, as opposed to the initial target of 100 million. And then now we are in phase 2, because the first one was between 2015 and 2020. Now, between 2021 to 2030, we are looking at supporting countries to implement these targets. And actually, Makueni project is one of the ways we're supporting the Kenya government, because Makueni, the 1.2 million trees, are also contributing to the Kenya's commitment of restoring 5 million hectares by 2030. And so we're also supporting countries to develop sustainable financing mechanisms that will help bring restoration to scale. And we also provide technical support to monitor progress and also see the impact of these restoration works between when we started 2015 and the target that we have 2030. Back to you, Michael.
The power of leadership when it comes to these issues cannot be understated. Dr. Adriana, just as a concluding thought here, I think many of us take this biosphere that sustains life for granted. How can we show a bit more gratitude in our actions as a species?
Well, I think perhaps the core take-homes of the IPCC report were that climate change is already with us. And we don't need to look further than the farmers we talk to, whatever part of the world, about how things are shifting. The crisis in Madagascar, the pandemic itself, which is a predictable outcome of the kind of shift we're causing in natural systems, to reflect and realize that this is the case. So where do we go from there, most importantly? And it's been such a pleasure to hear from George in so much detail, and from Mark, and how this collaboration is exactly, I think, the kind of network effect, the kind of collaboration that is going to get us through this. Individual action alone is not going to get us where we need to be, although of course every individual needs to be in the right mindset to think towards having a larger impact. So how do we do that? And I think it of course starts on an individual level. And as individuals, if we were looking for a comfortable life, I'm sad to say we've arrived on the wrong planet, or at least in the wrong time. This is not going to be an easy road from here on. However, we are all here for a reason, I believe. We all have a purpose to fulfill while we are here. And how can we find that purpose? And of course, I could go on for hours about this, but I think in one word, it's gratitude. If we feel gratitude for every breath of fresh air that we have, for every sip of clean water, for every mouthful of nutritious food, gratitude enough for the fact that we have it, but gratitude enough to try to share this experience with as many others as possible, including all of the other species that we share this planet with. I think that gratitude for the planet on a global scale is exactly what needs to be coupled with these global technologies that have kind of gotten us to where we are. A global gratitude for each and every person, for each and every project, And only with this sense of gratitude and collaboration, I think we can really seriously start working towards a future that we can be proud of. For some of us, whatever planet we're on, but certainly here on Earth. So thanks very much for this opportunity today.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Adriana Maree, South African theoretical physicist, technologist, and advocate for off-world exploration, for sharing your passion for what must be the burning issue of our time. Thanks to George Okwaro, Forester and Kenyan Associate at the World Resource Institute, the WRI, and Mark Elliott, Divisional President at Mastercard, for sharing your thoughts with us today. That's sadly all the time we have for. No time for Q&A. Lots of people with interesting comments and questions, and also reaching out to say, this is what we do. We're currently planting trees in townships. How do we get involved? Please stay in the chat room. I'm sure Mastercard will get hold of you, and we've got your details registering to the event, and we'll ensure that we do reach out. I think the bottom line is that as people change their attitudes and adjust their relationships with the environment, it really is important for all of us to take a stand and create new, innovative ways to inspire collective action to address climate change. From me, Michael Avery, thank you very much for your time. I am certainly very thankful for it. I know we're bombarded with webinars today, so thank you for taking the time out of your day to participate in this. And just a quick one, it's a passion point of mine to get everyone vaccinated in the country. I see Mastercard is partnering with Uber to offer everyone 2 free rides to and from vaccination centres. So if you haven't seen that, take advantage of it, go out there, get vaccinated. It's also the right thing to do. Everyone, thank you very much, and let's hope we can keep this momentum going well beyond COP26, because the planet, in fact, all of us need to do it. Take care.